And we're here with Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. And we are into our second week of training camp. And there's quite a lot to talk about, which is, as I say, it's always fun. And it's great for you listeners to be able to hear us talk about all these things. That's why you listen, right? You listen to hear us,
I would
which
hope
is
so.
incredible. By the way, before I came on here, Conor, I saw a tweet from David Wade of WBZ saying that is the Boston accent extinct? And I said, my good friend Conor Ryan probably is going to have something to say about that.
Listen, we're a dwindling few, but we hold our ground, Evan.
Stand strong.
We will continue to get dunked on with the way we talk, which is still my favorite part is when people say it's made up
I
because
love that.
when I'm in a professional setting, as I'm in, even though keep it loosey goosey on this podcast, but we're talking about something we base our careers on, we try to represent ourselves well.
This is
What I
true.
like to do in a professional setting is come across like I sound like Mr. French from The Departed. I do that on purpose, Evan. I do it just for the
Yes.
just for the shits and gigs, right? So
Yes.
no, unfortunately, that is how I talk. But again, I'm holding the line, Evan. Like it's not petering out on my watch. That's for sure.
Occasionally, I will see a YouTube commenter say it must be fake. And I always say, what's funny is, and maybe people don't realize this, when you get into this profession, you're taught to lose that. Like that's something that like
Yes.
TV people are told, like you cannot have an accent. So it would actually make no sense to just like put that on. Like I don't even understand, but it is beautiful and it is yours and you're a treasure for it. And hopefully the Bruins someday acquire Carter Hart, because that will be a splendid day on the
Mother of
timeline.
God, no. Please
That
do
will
not do
be
that.
it will be a great day.
No.
But the Bruins may acquire someone different, or they actually already have acquired that person, but they might keep them longer than the PTO they gave them, which was Anton Stralman, right shot, 36-year-old defenseman on the back end, coming from Arizona, which that's tough. That's not fun. Imagine going from Arizona, the Arizona hockey market, to Boston, being like, oh my God, there's fans in the stands. Oh my God, we're not in a college arena. This is incredible. But it is a legitimate addition. He's been playing with Hampus Lindholm in training camp. There still might be some left in the tank. You've been seeing him in training camp. How's he look?
Yeah, he's been solid. He's been as advertised. It's something that it's kind of when he spoke to the media, I was kind of surprised by the fact that he said that Boston's PTO offer was really the only kind of offer that was thrown out there for him because I get it. He was on a dumpster fire of a Coyotes team,
Terrible
but
team.
he was still a guy that they were trusting a lot of minutes for. I think he averaged, even at his age, 21, almost 22 minutes a night.
Yep. Almost 3
I,
minutes in shorthanded time per game.
yeah, like he has that. He offensively, again, granted he was getting a lot of reps, but he had 8 goals, 23 points, which I think if he was on the Bruins, his 8 goals for a defenseman would be second on the team behind McAvoy. And I think only Grzelcyk was ahead of him for points. McAvoy, Grzelcyk, and then Stroman would be right there with his 23 points. So it's not like he's a guy that's washed, right? Or he's a guy that you bring him in, see what you got, and you're going with the assumption that if he has anything left in the tank to bring along, but he's not in their long-term plans. And again, I don't think he's in their long-term plans in terms of 2025, obviously, but I think you look at what his skill set is and the state of Boston's D-core, he could definitely be a guy that makes it out of camp, gets steady minutes in the early going at the start of the year, whether it's with Lindholm maybe or on the third pairing potentially. And then once Grzelcyk and McAvoy get back, he's either fighting with that same crew of guys like Clifton and Zboril for minutes, or he's your seventh D, which I think he would bring value there. So it's really a low risk or really no risk at all signing for the Bruins in terms of bringing in this guy in terms of what he has. If he goes into a few preseason games, doesn't have it, then you can cut bait. It's not like the Bruins are barren. Like they would love to have McAvoy and Grzelcyk back, like make no mistake, but between Zboril and Clifton and Conor and a few of these other guys, they at least have options in the short term. But if you add another guy like Stroman into the mix, who's got a multiple years in the NHL, guy that plays heavy minutes, as you said, a lot of PK work, and maybe can spell someone like Kahlo or Forbert, block shots. He's a guy that could be a useful piece for this team. And again, if we get to December and January and he's on this roster and Jim Montgomery's sorting through all right, Zaboril's playing really well, Stralman's playing really well, Clifton's playing well. It's a good problem to have when you have all those guys playing at that level, fighting for maybe one or two spots. And let's face it, it's an NHL season. I think it's safe to assume you're going to be rotating quite a few guys in, especially on your defensive core.
That's a hot take. That's a hot take.
I know, wild. But
defenseman injuries never happens. It gives you depth on the right side, which is what you needed. I mean, this is, again, we were saying this around free agency opening. We figured, they don't have a lot of cap space, but it wouldn't surprise us if they went out and got, a third pairing right shot defenseman, which is exactly what he is. And if he plays well and makes sense in the preseason and sticks, hey, as you said, he takes on heavy minutes. He's not going to cost you a lot of money. And it's never a bad thing to have internal competition when the guys are good. Our problem with internal competition is when the guys are bad, which is what they've had in the past. The problem, though, is with a guy like Stralman, you don't want him taking minutes from a kid, or not a kid, but someone younger who kind of needs those reps. And I look at a guy like, Jakub Zboril, and I say, all right, well, if he's looking good, which we'll get to in a second, and, he's fitting in on the right side, do you want to take minutes away from a guy like Zboril, who maybe could be a long-term fit as a, stable defenseman on your second or third pair for a guy like Stralman? And to that, I say, well, it's kind of the competition aspect of it. If Stralman's not going to cost you a lot, I don't see the issue with this.
Yeah, no, not at all. And again, it's all comes back to the fact that it's just a good problem to have. I mean, listen, if we get into the final days of training camp and Stralman's looked good, but Zboril plays like he did in that first preseason game, I think the Bruins will take having a guy like Zboril, who's had the weight of the narrative over the first round pick, multiple injury setbacks, the injury setback last year. If he puts it all together and becomes a guy that's not just all right, we can take Zboril and slot him into that third pairing right side spot, he'll do his job there. If he becomes something even more than that, that's not to say that he's going to be like a top pairing guy, but a guy that can give you 18, 19 minutes, can give you 20-ish points on the blue line. Like, I think he has that skill set within him. The Bruins will take that. Like, it's not like they're, the first sign of adversity, they're going to kick a guy like Zboril to the curb in favor of someone like Stralman. But if both of them are playing well, you will find the spots for those guys to get in the lineup, and opportunity will be there because, again, going through an 82 game season is like going through like a friggin' car crash. So everyone's going to be banged up at various points of the season, whether it's just getting guys in there. It's a good problem to have and a luxury for the Bruins if, oh man, we need to get NHL veteran Stralman into a game to get him out there. Like that's your 7th D. You're doing pretty well.
If Jakub Zboril overcomes all the things he's faced, potentially being a bust, the injuries, like Mark Wahlberg is going to be playing him in a movie. So
it's gonna be, but it'll be him as Jakub Zboril in like a cataclysmic event. It would be like him as Jakub Zboril at like Chernobyl or some like other thing. It has to be like some cataclysm. It'll be Mark Wahlberg as Jakub Zboril, who, if you didn't know this, was the captain of the Exxon Valdez when it smashed into that iceberg. So
yes, or he'll be Captain Jakub Zboril is Captain Phillips. That'll be what it's like. But again, it's funny because I think when you mention a Bruins fans like, Zboril looks good. Could be a real player on this team. Could be a guy who sticks. They're like, oh, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Like the narrative is fixed, and we all admit it. We've all said it. How many times have we said it over the years? The 2015 draft was probably one of the main reasons they lost in 2019. Like the 2015 draft was a cataclysmic bad day in Bruins history, especially that first round, right? But there's nothing wrong with Zboril turning into a stable second or third pairing defenseman. Like, you're not getting Matt Barzal. Matt Barzal is not walking through that door. Kyle Conor not walking through that door. Thomas Chabot. But you know what? The guy you got in Jakub Zboril, if he pans out and works, what's wrong with that? So there's some resistance, I almost feel like, from people being like, oh no, he's a bust. Like, no, like actually maybe he isn't like, the 13th overall pick, but he's formidable.
He can bring you value.
He brings you value. Derek Forbort was a first round pick. Does he play like a first round pick? No.
Curtis Lazar was a first round pick. There's many like fourth line grinders.
Daniel Paille was a first round pick. Like there's first round picks that, they don't pan into Connor McDavid, Jack Eichel, Cale Makar studs, but they've served purposes on your team. And that's what Zboril's good at. And you saw it against Philly the other night where like he was good. Now, again, preseason game, you're playing against, guys in the AHL, basically. That's first, action of the year. But for a guy who tore his ACL less than a year ago, I would say he looked pretty good.
Yeah, no, it was everything you kind of saw during that brief 10-game sample size when he looked like a player that was going to be the NHL for the remainder of last season before that knee injury. Again, he's not flashy, but I think you see when he's playing with confidence and with poise with the puck, you can see all the little plays that sometimes lead to greater things. There were so many times, I think, even though the power play was, I think, 0 for 6, not great. But I think when you saw a few of the better stretches on the man advantage, a lot of it was maybe not a direct, primary setup from Zboril, but a lot of plays up high, evading a guy that was maybe pressuring him, making the smart, simple play, led to the puck into grade A ice and led to a few chances there. Like, that's what Zboril's good at. He's not Kale McCarr. He's not Charlie McAvoy or anything like that. He's not going to be, getting a head of steam usually through the neutral zone or doing anything like that. But if he can, kill plays and scoring plays, get the puck moving in transition, make that extra pass in the offensive zone that leads to more chances down low, he's doing his job. And again, that maybe doesn't reflect on the score sheet or doesn't make him a guy that's going to have an extensive highlight reel at the end of the year. But if he does those little things consistently over 17, 18 minutes a night, those are little things that contribute in the big picture to points in the standings and wins for the Bruins. So
he's very good at making the simple play. I remember noticing that a lot last year. Like, he's not, as you said, he's not flashy. He's not going to be, Bobby Orr out there. But if you can just get him to make, not make mistakes, that's it. Again, because the power play, when this team's fully healthy, the power play has their D at the top of the zone. You have Grzelcyk, McAvoy, Lindholm, Krejci. Like, you're good. You don't necessarily need Zboril to put up all those points. If he wants, if he does, like, terrific. I mean, geez, like, imagine if, like, as you said, imagine if he actually put together a 25 point season. You'd be like, oh my God, like, this is unbelievable.
I mean, he had three helpers in 10 games last year. Like, but he's got it in him.
Yeah. And he did, coming up, when they drafted him, he wasn't bad, clearly. But, I think if Jakub Zboril really wanted to be good, like really good, he would want to feel good all the time. And he would sign up with our new partners, or our next partners, Athletic Greens. Again, they have a product I use literally every day. I started taking AG1 because I wanted better gut health and more energy. I don't drink coffee or use caffeine because I wanted healthier, natural energy, and AG1 is providing it in droves. Doesn't taste like it's super healthy or anything either. Has a mild tropical taste that I actually look forward to each and every morning. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75. Yes, 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced ingredients, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. I couldn't even count to 75 on my hand while reading everything it provides. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, aging, all the things. It's lifestyle friendly. Whether you take keto, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it contains less than a gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while still tasting really good. Yeah, can't even count to the number of GMOs that are in this, because there's zero. There are no GMOs or nasty chemicals. And again, better sleep quality, mental clarity. Can't hate that. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop and a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, because Athletic Greens clearly is all about making it easy, they're going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs. 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 free travel packs. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Bruins. Again, athleticgreens.com/Bruins. Take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. So what's interesting about Stralman, who needs to get on that, obviously has to get on the Athletic Greens train.
Clearly.
The whole team needs to at this point. Start the year off right. But Anton Stralman, the question is down the road, and you touched on it a little bit when McAvoy and Grzelcyk come back. You're going to have a lot of defense back there. You're going to have a lot of guys competing for 6 spots on the bench, which is not many. And most of those spots are pretty much taken, right? McAvoy's got one. Lindholm's got one. Carlo hopefully has one. Grzelcyk, Forbert. And then it's a toss-up, and you have a lot of guys competing. And the name that I think a lot of people are kind of circling on their lists, like they have all summer, is if Stralman is good and he's cheap. Let's say he's like 1 year, 1 million, kind of like a Jack Johnson or something like that. And he's cheap and he's solid on the right side. And Zboril's playing well and they're competing for minutes. Does this make Mike Riley potentially expendable? Like, is this what truthfully makes him expendable? Because all offseason, you need D, you need depth. But with Stroman, you do have the added depth on the right side. Does this make Riley kind of expendable?
Yeah, I think it was probably the case going into this training camp, even before they signed Stroman, in terms of just looking at the potential guys and who would be expendable. And I think it just further adds to it. I think when you look at the fact that once Scorsese comes back, having both him and Riley together does kind of seem rather redundant. That's why I don't view someone like Forbort as being a risk of getting moved or anything like that, just because his skill set, I think, is so unique that you kind of need a guy like that. I think you saw in the Carolina series the value that he does bring, even though, again, it's not flashy, but he does serve a role on that decor. I just think that, yeah, Riley's just the odd man out when you look at just however it pans out, whether it be someone like Stralman who sets into an established role. If a guy like Zboril really breaks through and looks like an everyday NHL player, if Grzelcyk's back healthy and performing at the level he did before he had that shoulder injury, there's just so many scenarios that could work in favor of the Bruins. And like, it feels like almost all of them end up with a guy like Riley being the odd man out. And that's not to say that like Riley's washed or anything like that. Like he had a tough year last year, and that it seemed like whenever there was a D zone miscue, it always ended up in the net, which sometimes it's just poor puck luck, what have you. I mean, we saw how good he was during that brief time he was with the team in 2021. They traded for him, where he was almost like a revelation back there in terms of just how crisp he was in transition, adding offense to the blue line. Like, he's a very talented player. And if you had to move him, I'm sure there'd be plenty of teams lining up to take him, whether it's a team that's rebuilding or a team that just needs depth on the blue line. Like, he would be, I think, a pretty hot commodity if he was offered up there in a trade. But I think however you look at it, however this decor kind of pans out, all of them have kind of the same result, where a guy like Riley, just whether it's skill set, whether it's younger players stepping into the lineup, whether it's just more value being placed in other areas of what the Bruins need on the decor. I just think Riley's just the guy that doesn't fit into the long-term picture or just this year in terms of just the amount of bodies they have out there. And if you kept him, it's another situation where, sure, but I don't think that benefits anyone in terms of, one, the Bruins with the cap, in terms of just having that contract on the books. And a guy like Riley, whatever you think of him, he's not a bench player. He should be a guy that's playing every night somewhere in the NHL.
And he's taking up cap space. That's the other thing. And on top of that, like, let's say you need a depth forward or you need a winger. He can get you that. I think he can get you that player. Because again, as you said, this is not going to be a situation where no one's lining up to get him. Plenty of teams would love a left shot defenseman who could potentially run your power play. But I want to read you this. And I think this is the one hold up on Riley. This is the one hold up on Mike Riley. Trading him. Whereas, you might want to keep him. There's a new coach. And you wonder, with Jim Montgomery, is Riley going to be better? Is he going to be more effective in the lineup? And, you look at these comments he made on Bruce Cassidy. He said he's really smart with the system and everything, but definitely he would get on guys. Anyone could tell you that, which they have said that many times. He did a lot of good things in terms of teaching killing plays, gaps, and that stuff. But sometimes last year I kind of got in my own head a little robotic in terms of going back for a puck and I've got to do this, or going back in the neutral zone for a puck and it's got to be this. So you wonder, like, with Jim Montgomery, like, does Mike Riley blossom? And to that I would say, well, I don't know if it matters that much because there's other guys there. Like, Hampus Lindholm's good. Like, Riley's not filling in for Lindholm. He's not filling in for Grzelcyk. Those are two guys who can do what Riley does, but just a little bit better. And then you have Derek Forbort on the left side, who is there to be a shutdown, penalty killing kind of guy. So again, I think even if Montgomery can kind of get Riley, can kind of unlock untapped potential in Riley, maybe it, ups his value when they trade him in November, or if they trade him in November. But I don't know if that's something that's enough to say, hey, don't trade Mike Riley now.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I don't know. It's an interesting question. And again, we've talked about this all off season with Riley. He's got to be so sick of hearing his name out there with trade rumors, but it's just the way the numbers work on the back end. So anyways, Moving to forwards, we talked. Imagine in 2022, we spent like 10 minutes talking about Jakub Zboril. That like if someone came back to me in 2017 and said that, I'd be like, what? He's still around. But so Nick Foligno, speaking of guys who are kind of controversial in the world of the Bruins, Nick Foligno has been kind of a guy that, Jim Montgomery hasn't really committed to a third line. And, we've said all along, Foligno could be potentially a guy who's on that third line. And Nick Foligno spoke on Monday and said, I know I can score goals. I'm not worried about that. My track record speaks for itself. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to play my game and be a factor for this club. That's interesting because if they do go with Foligno on that third line, do you see a world in which he has value?
I mean, listen, I get what Foligno, the pitch that both the Bruins and especially Foligno have in terms of what else he brings in terms of, identity, leadership, the intangibles off the ice. But still, if you're in a third line spot, especially, you need to produce. That third line, how many times have we talked about it, of how much of a game changer it is when you've got a third line that can really capitalize against other matchups. When a guy like Coyle is playing well, Smith, it just makes it so much tougher for the opposing team to game plan around when you already have the Bergeron line, and now you've got this offensive juggernaut pretty much of Pastrnak, Hall, and Krejci together if it all works out there. So that third line needs to be a line that can really capitalize on their matchups, land punches further down on the depth chart. And for Foligno, it's I get what the Bruins are saying in terms of, he never really could get into a groove last year, dealt with a lot of lingering injuries coming off of back surgery. Like, I get it. But still, you got in a pretty set, sample size now in terms of his scoring, the numbers dropping. It wasn't just last year. I think it's since 2019, he scored 19 goals in, I think, 184 games.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not there.
It's just something where, and again, like maybe if you bring him down to the fourth line, maybe he can be a guy that bounces back and gives you 7 goals and 18 points. And if for a fourth line, that's, there's some value there, even if the overall cap situation doesn't really coincide with that, obviously. Like, he could still bring some value to this team. But on the third line, I would rather, you slot up someone else who has a little bit more of a higher offensive ceiling, I think, at this point of his career. And for Foligno, it's like an unfortunate situation because you don't want to like drag a dude who I don't think it's ever been a question at all about effort or willingness to engage down low or, his leadership or anything like that, the positivity he brings. It's great. He's a great guy to have in the room. It's just, you can only go so far without seeing the actual tangible scoring, right? Like, it's same as if he was just down in grade A ice and was creating chances of not scoring. You can only point to expected goals and some of these other things so many times before Bruins fans want to punch you in the face because they're like, all right, I need to see actual scoring. So
like Andre Kasha.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same exact thing in terms of just, you need some of that actual, goals on the board there that they're creating. So Bruins, it's clear based on the fact they didn't buy him out during the offseason that they still think he has a little bit more left in the tank, but it's, they don't really have that much rope to give him. There's so many other guys that are vying for those minutes, whether it's Beecher or Studnicka or Steen, McLaughlin, AJ Greer. There's so many guys that are, that are going to be coming for those minutes. So if Foligno doesn't, score a goal of one of these preseason games or has a dominant couple of shifts, he's got to be looking over his shoulder. That's just the way it is. And as much as the Bruins have faith in him, you can only go so far before you have to start looking at other options to get the best team out there on the ice.
Wasn't there a preseason game in 2019 when David Backes had like 2 goals?
That sounds or something. Right. There was some crazy game though where they played like the Blackhawks, and I think like they won like 8-1. So there was one of those games that got, and I think it was Pasta and DeBrus both had hat tricks. It was like they smoked them. So again, you never know how to go into those preseason games. But I do remember Backes had one game where he looked like St. Louis Blues Backes. I was like,
yes. And that's so far as like, again, like Foligno is, as we've said multiple times, great guy, great locker room presence, someone that I would imagine all the players love. Like I think he has a real part in that chemistry, but on that third line, I don't see it. And I don't necessarily see it with Frederick either. I mean, like we've said this, like, I think there's still more to get from Frederick, but I've always said, the offensive talent I just don't fully see. But I still think it's almost worth trying, Frederick there long-term to start the year over a guy like Foligno, because Frederick, I think, is still showing you a little more, and he's younger. But again, as you said, there's other guys vying for that third line spot. And again, I think once Marchand comes back and Zacha goes to the third line, I think then you're really wondering what Foligno ends up doing. Right. Because I think Zacha just goes to the third line, and then it's, you have a lot of people vying for those fourth line spots, and you wonder what's going to happen with like Tomáš Nosek, which we talked about on Poke the Bear. But we mentioned kind of the battle of the fourth line, which is becoming a more prevalent thing. And, it seems like the Bruins have two young centers who are exciting. One a lot more than the other because they're newer, but both kind of both came in with some high expectations. Johnny Beecher and Jack Studnicka. And there's not enough room on this roster, I don't think, for both, because you're pretty set down the middle, at least on the first three lines. And then you got one spot on line 4. And I don't see either of those guys starting on the wing. And, I think there's some people, saying Studnicka should play, that Jim Montgomery's a new voice. Maybe this will get him going. But I got to be honest, Connor, I want to see Beecher in that spot. I do. I've seen Studnicka. We've seen Studnicka. Maybe this is me just wanting the new toy, but I just keep looking at it and I go, and I also think Johnny Beecher's a way better fit for that role as the fourth line center if it comes to it. What do you think? I mean, do you even think there's a spot on this roster for a guy like Studnicka?
Yeah, I think that's the issue, is just the fit and what the role is, right? It's not like there's a 3C spot open where, all right, even if maybe Studnicka hasn't put together a set track record of the NHL, you throw him in there for 20 games, see what you got, and get a definitive answer. Now you are up against the clock in terms of, his service time and the fact that he needs waivers to go back down to Providence. So you're kind of stuck in that spot where, all right, the logic here is that you probably want to keep Studnicka and see where he fits. But again, where exactly does he go? Again, I don't think they want to put him on the wing. And if he's your 4C, if you're Montgomery, you're drastically augmenting like the entire identity of that fourth line, because is your fourth line like not a grinding line? Is it just like this young line of him and McLaughlin? But then where does Foligno fit into that mix? He doesn't really gel with what those. It makes just a big mess, right? Like, and It's unfortunate because I think what we talk about with Studnicka, even if he hasn't maybe seized that opportunity, the best chance for him was last year, where there was multiple spots in the lineup, and then the Bruins went out and signed Haula and Foligno and Nosek and all these players that set up those spots for training camp even started. And he had a good preseason last year, but just wasn't any spots for him. So it's tough because you saw, I think, especially in that preseason game on Saturday, where I think Beecher struggled a little bit with just the added pace of the pro game. And that's something he's going to have to deal with and fight through. But also Studnicka, who's been around for quite a bit, who also has played against a lot of those guys when they were on Lehigh Valley. Didn't see a lot from him either, right? Which is, I think, more concerning, right? Like, that's a game where if it feels like it's a lot of AHL talent, it's something where he should really kind of, put the team on his back and have a great performance out there. Didn't really see it. It's one of those things where you want a guy like that to succeed, but it's kind of like what we saw last year. I think it was the last or the second to last regular season game against Buffalo, where I think he had top 6 minutes. Like, all right, let's see how he does. And he didn't do much of it. He had that one really terrible clear that led directly to like a Buffalo goal. And that's all I remember from that game. So he's stuck in a spot where he has limited options, but even if you wanted to give him a chance, and he probably deserves something because he's going to hit waivers if he goes back down to the AHL. I just don't know where he fits. Like, he's not a fourth line center, right?
No. And the worst part is, like, if there were spots, Jim Montgomery would probably be the best guy for his development, like new coach, open to younger players, longer leash, like all these things, but there's no spots. And the other worst part is, and we've discussed this for the last 2 trade deadlines, they've torpedoed his value. Now, also he has torpedoed his value, but they especially have in kind of holding him going, hey, maybe he's potentially a 2C in the future. I don't see it. I don't. And there's been nothing that's shown that thus far. And I think next year, if David Krejci did retire, I mean, would anyone feel good going into the year with Studnicka as your second line center between, Taylor Hall and David Pastrnak? Probably not. And also, Coyle would be above him on the second line, in my opinion. Zaka, like I just think he's sort of been passed over at this point. And it's unfortunate when that happens because, again, good player, high expectations, just hasn't really panned out. But I don't really see the spot for him in this lineup. Whereas a guy like Beecher, and by the way, both have different styles of game. So I shouldn't like if they said, hey, who should be the second line center, Johnny Beecher or Jack Studnicka? I don't think you really want to pick either at the moment, but I do think for a fourth line center role, Beecher is much more suited for that. Whereas I don't know if there's a spot in the top 9 for Studnicka at all. So hopefully for Studnicka's case, if he doesn't get a spot here, they trade him to a team that's rebuilding, like in Arizona, put him in the top 6 and just kind of see what happens. Maybe that's really all you can do, because I don't think Studnicka is netting you any great player in return. I think you're getting picks, which is, not the greatest thing in the world. Again, I'm old enough to remember when he could have, or rumoredly could have, got you someone big at the deadline, but that ship has sailed. Anyways, a ship that never sails and something that's always worth it. A subscription over at BSJ. What can people look forward to from you over at Boston Sports Journal, Connor?
Yeah, we're going to continue to break down training camp. We've had training camp reports up pretty much every single day, breaking down the lineup. We're going to do some stock watch later on this week. We look at guys that could be putting themselves in a good spot for regular everyday minutes once the regular season starts up. We'll have coverage from the Garden. We'll be finally back at TD Garden for a few preseason games this week. Features down the pipeline, all that good stuff, video reviews, everything's locked and loaded for another season of Bruins hockey. We're excited to kind of delve into it and share with all of our BSJ subscribers. So please subscribe to Boston Sports Journal if you haven't already. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can do that at ConnorRyan_93.
Go do all that. For CLNS Media, I'm Evan Marinofsky. Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest of your week.